Um, on your notes today, I know you probably went, oh my goodness, but the last page of the notes I found to be something that I thought would be interesting because I always wonder about it. We're going to talk about some celebration today, and these are the feasts or the celebrations that God commanded His children, the children of Israel, to do. And there were 7 feasts, and it shows you the date, shows you why they were told to do those feasts, and then how they conducted the event, or what was happening when they did that event. So I just thought that would be something to have and interesting, because we read about Passover. We're pretty familiar with Passover and what happens, and that's coming up for the Jews is right before Easter for us. The Feast of Unleavened Bread. First Fruits is also called the Harvest. Feast of Weeks, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and the Feast of the Tabernacles. So I just thought that would be interesting, because when you read about them, they're somewhere back in the Old Testament, and you're not real sure anything about them. But I went ahead and put that on there for you for your notes. We're in Luke 15 today, and Jesus, we know, has been going around Galilee, and he's there preaching to people and healing people, and he's come up against that's okay. That's fine. He's come up against the Pharisees more and more and more, because they're getting their toes stepped on quite a bit about how they do religion versus what Jesus says that God requires of them. So chapter 15 starts out talking about some things that are lost. Jesus talks about 3 different events in this chapter. But the end of this chapter that we cover today is about a celebration. And we celebrate things. Anniversaries. Congratulations. 50 years is a long, long time. And so we celebrate things. People. We celebrate people. Yesterday, we celebrated Jimmy O'Quinn's life. And I don't think anything their kids said was anything that we didn't already feel about who Jimmy was and what he did. When he prepared a Sunday school lesson for us, he prepared to the fullest to be able to share as a wealth of information with us. What are some things you've celebrated? What are things that you celebrate? Birthdays.
Used to.
July the 4th.
Our national holidays, because it gives us opportunity to gather together as family, right? Christmas, yes, our holidays we celebrate.
Best one, Easter.
Easter, yeah, right. Easter's coming up. I was explaining something to my grandson. Riley was there with us yesterday, and we picked him up, and he said, "My mom and daddy have been watching a lot of basketball over the last few days." And I said, "Riley, let me explain to you. In the life of our family, March is our favorite month. Number 1, it's spring break from school. And I was a teacher, so that was very welcome. Number 2, our kids were basketball players, so it was March Madness time. And you had this concentrated time of about 3 weeks with basketball all the time." And I had to explain to him what March Madness was about. And so even with March Madness, we see celebrations. Yesterday, I was looking at scores, and can't even remember what team it was. It was one of the high school championship games played in San Antonio on Friday. The team from Beaumont hit a 3-point shot with 3 seconds left on the clock and won the state championship. That's some celebration going on. You know what's happening when those things happen. So and our church celebrates. One of the things that the church announces in church is people that have birthdays if they're over how old?
90.
If they're over 90 years old. And so they announce to celebrate with them on their birthday. Sometimes it might just be celebrating that they didn't die. If you think about it, the older we get, the celebration is more because you're still here rather than because it's your birthday. So God commanded these festivals. He commanded celebration. He commanded a time to gather together as a group of people and celebrate. And in today's lesson, Jesus was responding to the Pharisees about some criticism of him sitting down with sinners and celebrating and being with sinners. And he was eating a meal with them, which always is an indication of some sort of celebration generally. So they were criticizing him for the time that he was spending with sinners. And in response to that, he talks about three situations, three things that were lost. The first few verses in 1 through 7, he tells about the shepherd that lost a sheep. And the shepherd goes and he searches and he leaves all the rest of them and he goes to find that one sheep that's missing. And when he finds it, he celebrates. There's a celebration. And the next verses, 8 through 10, he talks about a woman that found a lost coin. She had a coin that she had lost. Doesn't say whether it was the monetary value of the coin she was searching for or if it was just a special coin that she wanted and she was searching for it. And she found it. And in both of those cases, it said they called their friends and their family together to celebrate that something was lost, but it had been found. And, you know, I can think about things that I've lost and I finally found them. Sometimes it was months or years later, and sometimes it was you had to backtrack your steps. Have you ever kind of walked backwards through your day or through the last moment to try and figure out where you left something? Yeah, and usually you can track back and find it. So, but they celebrated with neighbors and family, and that's what Jesus wanted to talk about in the next verses. Talks about a lost son. And some of us have been in those places, and we've had a family member that wandered. So in verses 11, I'm reading from the box that's on your notes there. It said, "Then he said," Jesus that is, "a certain man had two sons. The younger of them, inappropriately," this is from the Amplified Version, "said to his father, 'Father, give me the share of property that falls to me.' So he divided the estate between them. A few days later, the younger son gathered together everything that he had and traveled to a distant country." We don't know where he traveled, but we do know it was what?
Long way.
A long way. So it's going to be a long trip to get there. Or he was just going to go until he found a place that he felt like was good, that he thought he was, you know, whatever he had dreamed up in his head, that's what his ideas were. And there he wasted his fortune in reckless and immoral living. Now, when he had spent everything, a severe famine came in the country, and he began to do without and to be in need. So he went and he forced himself on one of the citizens of the country, who sent him into his fields to feed the pigs. He would have gladly eaten the pods, the carob pods, it says, that the pigs were eating, but they could not satisfy his hunger, and no one was giving anything to him. But when he finally came to his senses, boy, that's a strong word. We've all been in that boat before. There's all of us that had something that we disagreed with or something we didn't like, and we finally came to our senses. He said, "How many of my father's hired men have more than enough food while I am dying here of hunger? And I will get up and go to my father, and I will say to him." So he's rehearsing what he's going to say, right? Okay, I wonder how this will sound. "Father, I have sinned against heaven and in your sight, and I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Just treat me like one of your hired men." That's a lot of information in a small amount of time right there. But Jesus is telling the story. Well, there's a couple things we learn. Getting lost is easy. We've all been there, whether it's a daily momentary thing or it's a lifetime or a few months of our lifetime. I think that this COVID thing has put us in a lot of different emotional areas. But again, one of those areas is that it's real easy to stay home and not get dressed to come to church. Because it's a lot more comfortable to stay in your pajamas and socks and just watch it on TV. And that, it's put us in that position. We have to make strong decisions to say, you know what, this is God's day, and I'm capable, and the church is open, and I can go and do this. Some days it's not convenient, but we're blessed with the opportunity to be able to engage in church because of that. But we don't know what this son was searching for. But if we think back to our teenage years, and we assume that he's probably teenage to 20s maybe, he's working for his father, he's been there with his father still. We don't know what he's searching for, but we all had ideas at that age that were kind of dumb. And we did some of those things that we thought were just brilliant, and they weren't. He had money, he had opportunity, he had youth, and he had idealism. What's a good word for idealism? Think about when you were that age and how you were influenced by the world. You had a better idea. What is it? Ford has a better idea and the light bulb comes on. Yeah, they had better ideas about how the world was going to be and how they were going to fix the world. So
They could do it better.
yeah, they could do it better. The world was attractive. They had good ideas to do things. And he had a taste of home. He had a good solid place. He had home. He had his father's rules, maybe, that weren't so good to him, or he didn't think they were. He worked, and his father was the boss. Maybe he didn't.
Well fed.
Huh?
Well fed.
Yes, he was well fed. He had family there, albeit we learn a little bit about the brother. He was an overachiever. Have you ever had that in your family? Where you had to live up, when you had to live up to another sibling? Well, I have two sons, and my older son is an overachiever, and he wants everything to be perfect, and he likes it that way. My second son didn't really agree with his older brother's philosophy, even when they were this big. They were never close friends, even being 2 years apart, because their personalities were so extremely different. We see the same thing right here. These two brothers that we see here, the two sons. But he also had somebody else. He had God as a part of his life. He was raised in that environment to have God be a part of his life. But none of that satisfied his mindset. Somewhere in his mind, the grass was going to be greener in Pasadena. It was going to be greener on the other side somewhere. And so he set out. He was looking for something that he didn't have, but he went to somewhere in a distant country. And he gets over there and he empties his wallet out, spending on things he didn't need to spend on. And he didn't have planning, and he didn't have budgeting, and he didn't have any idea of stewardship or accountability, evidently. I think about people that inherit large amounts of money, and they don't have strong backgrounds to help manage that money, and what usually happens to it.
Like water.
Yeah, they run it like water. And so do professional athletes in some cases. There's
Like lottery winners.
a lot of cases. They just spend and spend and spend, and then they don't have enough money for anything, and they're bankrupt. I know ESPN did a story, one of their 30 for 30s, about the wasting of their money and not knowing how to do it all. So, getting lost under those circumstances was real easy. So that's where we find this son. He's lost. He's out. And in the commentary, it said, we are squandering everything that God has given us. And that's what this young man did. God had provided their family, through his father's inheritance, a whole bunch of stuff. Evidently very wealthy. But then it said he had to do what? He came to his senses. He came to his senses. In verses 14 through 19, and that's hard. That's hard. He left his father's house. He had no idea what it was going to cost for him to do what he planned, and he wasted his money. One of the sermons that I was studying through said there was an old saying, and I've heard our preacher say this: sin takes you further than you ever thought you'd go. It will keep you there longer than you ever intended to stay, and it will cost you more than you ever expected to pay. Yeah. So he didn't have any money on hand and nobody to feed him. And then what else happened in the country? There was a famine. Okay, there was a famine. So, it wasn't going to work. You couldn't find jobs. You couldn't find food. He was searching for a job, and he finally ended up in the fields of some man that said, okay, you can come work in my fields. But then what was he having to do?
Feed the pig.
Feed the pigs. Why was that such a problem for a Jewish boy?
Because it
This is a low-life job.
It's a low-life job, but how did the Jews think about pigs?
They couldn't eat pork.
They couldn't eat pork. Yeah, that was part of the command, that the meat would be unclean and they couldn't eat pigs. So that was even more insulting, that this is the job you get and that's what you have to do.
Yeah, so we cook pork well done. So
Yeah, we could tell it's well
so
done.
it's the we cook.
Right. Well, it said it was hard enough to be hungry enough to want to eat pig food. Because he said, just eat it. But he came to his senses. Coming to your senses, it says, requires humility, admission, facing others, and giving up. You know what? That sounds like what we have to do to come to Jesus. Come because we've done something wrong that we need to ask for forgiveness about. Admit that we did something wrong. We've got to come face to face with who?
Christ.
With Christ. And give up our way of doing things. Give up our way of doing things. So getting lost is easy, but coming back is hard. It's coming back. Okay, so verse 20, it says, so he got up and he came to his father, but while he was still a long ways off, his father saw him and was moved with compassion for him. And he ran and he embraced him and he kissed him. And the son said to him, Father, this is what he rehearsed, right? I have sinned against heaven and in your sight, and I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Well, we see two things here. We see the son's need for forgiveness. 4 choices I wrote leave scars and destruction. Scars on his own life, but destruction amongst his family and relationships, right? Yeah. So, one of the commentaries said, imagine what he might have looked like when he comes back.
He was filthy.
Filthy, dirty. Probably his clothes were
Lost weight.
probably lost weight. He hadn't been eating. Clothes, his shoes were worn out. Maybe didn't even have any shoes. And we know that he had to come from where? A distant country. So he'd been traveling for a while. He probably had to ask for, beg for money along the way just to have something to eat on the trip back. So, the whole trip back is going to have some humility in it too. Just along the way, he's going to be digging for stuff. And then he's even thinking, what are you thinking when you're headed back home? It's kind of what
We're gonna be like,
Andy talked about yesterday when you're coming back home and you're 30 years old and you're going to move back in with your parents. Some of those feelings about, how am I going to be received? And the other thing I thought about is this. When you've gone out and you've done some things and you come back and you want to tell people your stories, what kind of stories did he have to tell? He probably didn't have great adventures to talk about, did he? No, he didn't have a whole lot to share with them. So I think a lot of things would have been on his mind. He was pretty hopeless and he was pretty helpless at this point. Our Sunday school commentary said this man was the epitome of the sad state of every sinner who comes to God for salvation. Is that what Jesus was trying to convey to the Pharisees? Yeah, that's what he's trying to convey, this is what these people are like that I'm sitting and eating a meal with. This is who these people are. It also shows that no sin is too great to keep us separated from God's love and his acceptance. No sin is too great. Well, then we also see the father here. This father was probably lonely. He missed one of his sons. He had a son with him, but you're still missing something that belongs to you. But it says he spotted the son from afar off. That means he'd been looking for that son. He'd been looking for him to come, probably hoping and standing and taking a look every day to try and see, I wonder if he's going to come back. That this wayward son would come home. think about what the word home means. I thought about that. If you're going to go home, what are you going to expect to find when you go to your home?
Comfort.
Comfort.
Peace.
Kathy got home from the hospital. She said, I just wanted to sleep in my bed and see how that felt. To have home has some really special, warm connotations that this boy is regretting what he's done probably, but now he's going to look for some of those things that were the home that he had. Well, the father gave his son all those homey things. Said he gave him some stuff. So we're going to see. Said in verses 23, it says, and bring the fatted calf and slaughter it. Oh, I skipped verse 22 in there somewhere. 15:22. I'm missing a verse. It said, but his father said to his servants, quick, bring the finest robe in the house and put it on him. Get a ring for his finger and sandals for his feet. So get him some clothes. We're going to have a party, and they're going to give him a ring. Now I went back to look up and see what is the significance of a ring, or he's like, okay, why does he need a piece of jewelry? But this ring would have been what's considered like a signet ring, and a signet ring would have been used for official documents, and it would be like they dip it in wax and they put an imprint on it, and that imprint then would say, this is part of this family. This is the indicator that you belong in this family. So that's the importance of this ring. He gave him a ring to indicate the inclusion that he would have in that family now. It said, and bring the fatted calf and slaughter it, and let us invite everyone and feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was as good as dead and is alive again. He was lost and has been found. So they began to celebrate. So they're celebrating. They had a fatted calf. Now, normally, this feast would have taken some time to prepare, because this is going to invite friends and family, and it's not just one or two people. It would have been a large celebration. Our commentary said many families ate meat only on special occasions. So the fact that they're having meat is a huge deal, because they didn't usually eat meat on just a regular meal. It was special. And the slaughtering and the cooking of calf would have been done only for an important event. And the son had encountered these situations, left him in dire straits, and he was nearly dead, starving to death, but now he's alive. So just like those two things that were lost, the coin and the sheep, now we have a lost son that's found, and he's again having a celebration for people to come. Well, then we have a problem. Now the older son was in the field, and when he returned and approached the house, he heard music and dancing. Well, so he probably is out in the field for several days as this party is being planned, and he knew nothing about it. Nobody asked him. He summoned one of the servants, and he began asking what the celebration meant. And the servant said to him, your brother has come, and your father has killed the fatted calf, because he has received him back safe and sound. But the elder brother became angry and deeply resentful, and was not willing to go in, and his father came out and began pleading with him. He is pouting.
When you, probably.
Probably. If my brother had taken half of the inheritance, and whose inheritance was this? The older brother in a Jewish family would receive the double portion of the inheritance. And so this other brother is getting inheritance. So the older son, we also see that he was the good son. Where was he coming from? He was working out in the field. He was a hard worker. He was the overachiever. He did what the father said. He followed rules. He's a rule follower. But he hears singing and dancing, and he hadn't even heard about anybody planning a party. So he felt left out. And then he was told why they were celebrating. It made him even madder. But think about it. He didn't even care about whether his brother was alive or dead. He's just gone, and he's taking money, and he's doing dumb things somewhere. But two things I wrote on here. Why first of all, why was he so mad? And I just kind of thought of these ideas. If this were me, why would I be mad? Well, he didn't think his brother was getting what he deserved. Because he went off and he did foolish things, right? And he didn't think so now justice and judgment comes in. And we all make judgments about whether we think people are being treated fairly. And sometimes we can do some things and be appreciative of the mercy that we get, but we forget that that same mercy could be applied to somebody else. So, yeah. And then the second thing I thought about was, what if he thought that now the inheritance is going to be split even again and be lesser because now this son is being welcomed back, and would he receive an inheritance again after he'd already got the son? So then, here's a monetary issue. Could the remaining inheritance be divided up again? I don't know. But anyway, we know he's mad and he's pouting, and we would probably all sit in that same place at some point in time. I think we all have sat there and go, how come they got that and we didn't get that? But whatever. But he said to his father, look, these many years I have served you, and I have never neglected or disobeyed your command. So now what's he doing? He's trying to justify his own behavior. I'm a good son. I've done everything for you. Yet you never have given me a young goat. Okay, here's your goat. Are you happy now? Would he have been happy?
No.
No, he wouldn't even have been happy. Because it wasn't the kind of goat he wanted. Maybe it didn't look the same. It didn't look right.
Celebration wasn't the same.
Yeah, it wasn't the same. You didn't give me a party so that I might celebrate with my friends. You didn't give me a goat, and you didn't bother to give me a party because I'm such a good son.
Sounds like he's single.
Sounds like he might be single too, yeah. But when this other son of yours arrived, who has devoured your estate with immoral women, you slaughtered a fatted calf for him. He's pretty upset. Then the father said to him, son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. Do you think the father had to gather himself before he said that?
So if he had a
I think he'd been thinking a long time about how this situation could play itself out. Whether I never see this son again, or what will I do if I do see him again? It's probably something that would play out in the mind. And he said, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. But it was fitting to celebrate and rejoice, for your brother of yours was as good as dead and has begun to live again. He was lost and he has been found. Sometimes our kids have to hear a hard lesson from us about some things that they don't want to hear from their parents. And it's like that was even said yesterday that Jimmy always would share his advice but give them a distance to make decisions on their own. And sometimes we've got to come back to our kids and say something to them that might be a hard thing for them to hear, but it was necessary for them to hear. And here's what this father said. It was fitting to celebrate. What I did was right, because we're celebrating that this brother was lost and he's back again. He forgave him. That's a hard thing to understand. A hard thing to understand. And I wrote the pastor's verse there, Deuteronomy 29:29. Sometimes we don't understand how somebody can do something, yet other people can forgive them for what they've done. I like to watch crime dramas. And you see families who've had a family member that was murdered. And then the family will say, we forgive this person. It's tough. I don't know how. It's something we don't understand. And in 1 Corinthians 13:9-10, it says, but now we see through a glass dimly, but then face to face, we'll see it and we'll understand it. We don't understand forgiveness. We don't even understand what God has done for us. The older son, in all his self-righteousness, had no understanding or appreciation of grace. He didn't understand. Because he was so busy doing things himself and being so perfect in how he did things, he didn't have an appreciation for people that fail and need to have some grace given to them. He was identified with the Pharisees right here. That's what Jesus was trying to point out. And the other thing in the commentary, it said, while some people are separated from God because of rebellious living, others are lost under a disguise of piety. Is that the Pharisees? Yeah, that's true. That's true. The father demonstrated even more grace than the older son. Instead of being disgusted by that son's anger and selfishness, or even the fact that he hated his brother, the fact that the older brother hated his younger brother, the father showed him that same grace, that same generosity to this older brother who was pouting and sad. That father showed him grace too, in both cases. And then Jesus ended the parable. He didn't indicate whether the older son changed his mind or if he even came and joined in the celebration. Did you see that? He didn't tell how the story ended. It allowed the religious leaders to finish it for themselves, because that's who's here in this story. And were they going to be unwilling to rejoice with the sinners that Jesus was spending time with? Or were they even going to be willing to repent and join the party too? That's something Jesus wanted to find out. I wrote there to finish it. Let's take every opportunity to rejoice and celebrate those who were dead but are now alive in Jesus Christ. You know, sometimes it's hard for us to rejoice and celebrate when we see other people getting good things. You know, Kathy and Carl go and watch softball and watch their granddaughter play. And you know, when the other team wins and they're all jumping and celebrating, sometimes we sit in our sad state and just can't be happy for somebody else. I think sometimes it's hard for us to sit and be and to be cheering for other people. I noticed that within my own family of when we can't just sit down and watch something just for the sake of watching it and being able to cheer for the event that's happening, not for an individual team that's happening. And so that's what we need to be willing to do, is we need to cheer for the event that's happening. And God says when somebody is saved, it's not our place to question, I wonder if they're really sincere about this. We just want to celebrate that they stood up in the service because they said, there's got to be something different in my life. Just standing up takes a lot of courage. Just to stand up in the midst of that. Whatever decision continues to stay with them down the road is that they made some commitment. There was something that day that said, I need to stand up for this moment, whatever it may be. And in the meantime, we can pray for them that what they are standing for is something that's sincere, that their life will change, and that there will be repentance, is what the pastor talked about real seriously last week in the service. So let's be willing to rejoice and celebrate when the lost comes home. Thanks for. We do want to remember and pray for our sweet friends, the Rouses, and continue to pray for Tanya and Bill. As I did see Tanya in church Sunday. She was sitting down with Rhonda, but continue to pray for them as they deal with their situation too. As far as we know, yeah, but one is just in the city, the address that Kathy sent us out. So. Well, thanks for being here today. Happy anniversaries. Tita, we're glad to see you back. We missed you last Sunday. Okay. Larry Henderson, would you close us in prayer?
Our Heavenly Father, we come to you, Lord, every day, every Sunday, every day of the week, Lord. Thanking you for the many blessings you do upon us. We just ask that you be with those that are on our sick list, Lord, be with the Rouses in this special time of need. We just ask that you think about Cindy this week, Lord, as she's going through a terrible time. We know that, Lord, you'll help her through this. We just ask that you be with Martha as she prepares our lessons every week. We just thank her for that. And we just leave it all up to you, Lord. In Christ's name we ask. Amen.
Amen.